charging extra in school holidays. I'd like, in a sense, to start with an email I received a few minutes ago from somebody who says he's a parent of 3 children who was hoping to take his children to Turin next February half-term 2015. And if you look at the BA website right now, Friday the 24th, no, right now, it was earlier, yeah, that was earlier. The prices are from £54 on the Tuesday and Wednesday, 10th and 11th Feb 2015. On the Thursday, those go to £112, and on Friday from £344 for a single person. That's a one-way flight for a single person. How on earth can we ever afford to pay these sorts of prices? And that, in essence, is what this is all about. And the fact is that many parents across the country are having great difficulty in affording to go on holiday with their children. And a lady called Donna Thresher actually posted this particular e-petition some time ago. And although Paul Cookson has been campaigning to get signatures for it since he found that Centre Parks doubled their prices at half-term, Donna has said, firstly, we, the undersigned, are grateful that our voice is to be heard. The news of the debate is welcomed by all of us as we feel this is a positive step towards an outcome that we deem extremely important to the well-being of family life. For those of us that work hard, pay our bills and taxes, a family holiday is the only time off we get to spend quality time with our families. The government are struggling to understand why we have benefits Britain, and one of the reasons is simple: broken families. Parents need time off, they need to enjoy their children and have time together as a unit. With holidays being priced out to such a degree makes them unobtainable, means families are not getting this important time together. Now, this petition was in fact tabled before the changes to the regulations that came into force in 2013, on the 1st of September 2013. And I would thank the chair of the Backbench Business Committee for the Backbench Business Committee allocating time for this debate. But these comments were also written after the new regulations came in. Obviously, the new regulations are very relevant to this. And it says that the original petition still stands in its own right, but we do feel that the change in legislation has impacted the costs even further. However, there are things to be considered. The petition was raised almost a year ago, and the legislation with regard to the change in the discretionary rights of head teachers to allow pupils time off in term time had not at the time been made public. And her thoughts since the change in legislation are that holiday prices have increased even further. Schools will no longer know when children are being removed for a holiday, as parents may decide to not say. This could constitute a safeguarding issue and end up with social services involved. And the 10 days discretionary was working. Why did it have to be changed? Fines are sought by the school, and yet they don't receive the money. It goes to the council and not back into the schools themselves. Therefore, this seems to me, to her that is, to be another stealth tax.
Would my honourable friend allow?
Happily.
Would he like to confirm, though, whether it was 10 days or 10 sessions that used to be the previous rule? And I think you'll find that half a session is actually half a day.
My understanding was, in fact, it was 10 days.
I think they're wrong.
You may be right on that, but that has been changed anyway. What we have here also, then, is the issue of the new regulations, as we discussed at the committee. And, in fact, there's a group called Parents Want to Say that was set up following the introduction of the new regulations. They have a website themselves. And there are a number of e-petitions relating to this. 49640, which is reversing the changes to school time family holiday rules. And then there's another one, 53002, calling on the government to help British families manage the parent trap of inflated holiday prices in summer by suspending or reducing the rate of air passenger duty for the annual summer holiday period of July and August. 45247, relax the strict rules on term time holidays for school children. Give parents the right to take their child on holiday in term time if the holiday would benefit the child. Respect the rights of the child and bring time holiday regulations in line with UNCRC. Specifically, Articles 3, 4, 5 and 31 standardise the criteria for term time holiday approval to prevent inconsistencies. 46455, family time is so much more essential in the current working world that so many people cannot afford holidays in school holidays. A break at home is not the same as getting away from it or when there isn't any housework or DIY to get done. Instead, focuses on the family. It's time to stop the holiday companies cashing in on school holidays and let parents have some guilt-free family time. Enforce action that caps the percentage increase on holiday prices in school holidays. And then there's 55426, which is on the website, but I'm not going to read it now, 51533, 42884 and 23709. The fact is, this is actually a very good example of how effective an e-petition can be to take an issue that is of considerable concern to a large number of our constituents across the country and get it raised and debates in Parliament. So it does actually, to me, look like a success of the e-petition system. And you wish?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I apologise for not being able to stay for the entire debate, but I wanted to come to support my honourable friend. I've had a lot of letters from constituents about this issue in Shrewsbury who feel very strongly that the government has to show some innovative thinking to resolve this matter for those hard-working families who sometimes do, on those rare occasions, need to pull their children out for a holiday.
I thank my honourable friend for his points on this. I think as I go into the different circumstances of different people, different families have different circumstances, and having a one-size-fits-all is not necessarily the best solution. The interesting part about this is that the tensions that have come up beyond the initial problem of high prices during the holidays arose from the new regulations, which were a statutory instrument or secondary legislation, which was 2013-756. Interestingly, for those people who are interested in procedural things as I am, this was actually a negative resolution. That is, it went through Parliament as long as Parliament didn't vote against it. And Parliament would have had an opportunity to discuss it had anybody tabled a motion, an early day motion, saying that they wished to pray against this. But nobody did actually pray against this. There was no discussion about it. It was laid before Parliament on the 4th of April 2013, and there was, in fact, no request from the House of Lords for a debate on the floor there, because it was considered that the House of Lords differs from the House of Commons, in that the House of Lords has a merits committee, and the merits committee looked at the merits of this and decided not to comment on it. Yet we find from our constituents that there are considerable problems across the country, and that in a sense is the strength of this e-petitioning process, that something that went through the nod on Parliament actually has, when it comes to concern with constituents, they have a mechanism to raise the issue, and it has been raised, and we now have everybody here to look at the issue. And what happened in those regulations, and to disagree with my honourable friend from the points you made earlier, reading from the Department for Education website, the regulations were changed from a previous thing of where it was up to 10 school days, not to 10 school sessions per year, to one where actually only exceptional circumstances were allowed for leave. And as I said, I will come to some of the specific instances earlier. So in a sense, we had a situation where, although there was some form of consultation on the regulations change, that didn't get across to people, and Parliament wasn't aware of the concerns of constituents when it came in, but that has changed now. Now the questions are, how do we deal with this situation? Obviously, we have a very serious problem facing a lot of our constituents, otherwise we wouldn't have so many people here to look at it. The issue about to what extent you can force companies to charge the same price every time during the year, I don't think that's a practical solution, particularly within a market where people are coming to this country. You could get touts for holidays and all sorts of things. There are, however, two solutions in terms of dealing with demand. One is flexibility in terms of holiday periods, that is staggering holidays. And the other one is a certain amount more flexibility, moving back towards where it was, but not necessarily as far as it was, allowing people in the right circumstances to take their children out of school in term time. And there are circumstances under which I think that's reasonable. Looking further at the regulation, we already have Ofcom, Ofwet, Ofgem. I don't think we can have off on holiday. I don't think that is something that will actually work. The other proposal that has been put forward is a reduction in air passenger duty. I think there's a problem with that, which doesn't benefit UK holidaymakers. If we go back to Paul's case where he was worried about twice the price at Centre Parks being in the UK, wouldn't have an effect there. And when it gets to the Treasury, I think this would go into a nosedive, and we would find it was not a flyer. So we then come down to the question... Sorry about that. I give up on the jokes now. We then go on to the question here, which is what actually happens in terms of flexibility of holiday. And one of the interesting documents I have found is a document which is a copy of Travel Trade Gazette from 1963. And in this it reports, and I'll read out from it, it was in the House of Commons on February 12, 1960, that approval was first given to the setting up of a committee to examine the question of extending the UK holiday season. The subject was introduced by Mr Robert Matthew, MP for Honiton, in a motion which read that this House, recognising the need to extend and adjust the holiday period so as to relieve congestion at the peak period, asks Her Majesty's Government to set up a committee to examine this question urgently with special reference to the educational, tourist trade and transport interests concerned and the problem of summertime with the power to recommend early action. Well, we are now a good few years on from that. I don't think we have had the early action. Now, that was 1963. In 1964, the heads of Germany's regional governments, who are responsible for state education, were called together to stagger the summer holidays in such a way as to avoid all of the region's leisure seekers leaving for and returning from their holiday at the same time, with the corresponding detrimental effects on traffic and demand for accommodation in tourist areas. So they divided the country up into 5 roughly equal population blocks, which are all set to have different holiday periods and move those around. Now that's interesting because they did manage to do something in Germany, and in fact I understand that the Republic of Ireland, Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Finland and France also have such a facility. Now, interestingly, we do have Schedule 14 of the deregulation bill, which is currently being discussed. And Schedule 14 does allow head teachers to make a decision as to when holidays are. And the National Association of Head Teachers, Russell Hobby, who's their General Secretary, has said very recently that NAHT has been saying for some time that there's an argument for more flexibility over term times to relieve the pressures that drive up holiday costs. However, it's important for schools to coordinate timings across the town or region. Parents with children at different schools would not welcome the inconvenience and childcare costs of different term dates. Now, obviously, that's a very sensible thing. There's also teachers you have to think of. The teachers who do have children wouldn't like to find that their children were on holiday at a different time to themselves. And so the issue about changing, staggering holiday dates is definitely something that can be done. But it will need coordination. It won't be something just to wash our hands of. It may be a job for the Education Select Committee to look at, in conjunction with people, how we stagger holidays across the country to manage the process so that we don't end up with a situation where everyone's trying to go on holiday at the same time and the prices rocket. So that's one thing. Now then there is the question, the more difficult question, which is about when people should be allowed out of school during term time and what exemptions should apply. And again, I'd like to quote from things that people have said to me. And this is from one person. This coming Tuesday is my uncle's funeral in Folkestone. Our 3 children were quite close to him. We inquired of their schools, primary and secondary, whether they'd be prepared to grant exceptional circumstances leave for 1 day only, and in both cases they said they felt unable to do so under the new rules. Right, so there we have a situation where somebody has cited a specific example where children have been refused permission to go to a funeral of what is their great-uncle. I think personally that's wrong. We have then the situation with parents who are in a situation where they don't have choice as to when they have holiday. So here we have a lady who's returned from maternity leave to her post as a staff nurse in a bone marrow transplant unit at a hospital. And despite putting in an early request for annual leave during the Easter or summer half-term break, her requests were not granted as too many other nurses were off during these periods, and obviously the unit has to remain adequately staffed. In addition to this, her husband has been unable to secure annual leave during the summer break, and they've always made best efforts to book holiday time during school breaks. However, the only week they could secure together this year was in June, no school holiday. Now, here you have somebody who's spending her time saving lives. Because she is committed to that, she doesn't have flexibility in holiday, and the new rules say she can't go off on holiday with her children. I think personally that's wrong.
Would the honourable gentleman give
Yes, happily.
Would he also recognise the particular problem that members of the armed forces face? And some schools have been very pragmatic towards members of the armed forces, particularly if they're being deployed, to allow them to spend a holiday with their children. And I think this is a particular issue, and particularly shoddy when they're not given that opportunity, especially as we now have the Armed Forces Covenant.
I do thank the honourable member for making that excellent point that I would happily have made myself, but now no longer need to. I give way.
Amanda Wooding, who is in fact a childcare specialist, and she finds, of course, that she's particularly in demand during the school holidays, but she has children of her own, so of course she can never take them on holiday at times other than school holidays because of her profession.
Yes, and I think the Honourable Member makes an excellent point that this is all about individual cases and looking at individual cases. Perhaps the hardest case is that of the police, because the police find themselves not having any choice as to when they take holiday very often. But they also face a situation whereby, in fact, if they get fined, they get fired, potentially. And that is a double whammy of the situation, that not only are you required to, you have the difficulty of when you have holiday, but also you face potentially losing your job. Because that is clearly not very fair to those situations. I have another constituent here who said they had one family holiday a year up to this year. They've been fortunate to be able to do that for a week during school term, always being authorised by school, but they can't afford to take the same holiday during the school holidays. And although the children's attendance is otherwise excellent, and that's the point they make, is that they ensured that their children's attendance was excellent, ensured that they maintained their educational standards, do work, whatever it may be. They're now in a situation where, from a cost-effectiveness point of view, it's cheaper to pay the fines. And it's not actually very good to have a structure in society where we're encouraging people effectively to break the criminal law because it costs them thousands of pounds money not to break the criminal law. I have another story here of some people who live in Australia, and they have difficulty visiting family if they don't have any flexibility at all. And what they say is, what is clear is this ruling actually favours the rich. Those who can afford it pay the fine for taking their children out. I know of one family who recently took themselves skiing to do this, whilst those on low incomes who cannot afford the fine but feel they must go will get a criminal record. The ruling is draconian. And similarly, I've had a constituent who has links to Pakistan, and they have concerns that it's damaging their family links as well. So those give you some idea of the exceptions that actually I think are now not being treated as exceptions. In terms of mechanisms for change, well, I think firstly we should look at the Taylor report itself. It was the Taylor report that drove these changes, and recommendation 6 was that changes are made to the pupil registration regulations to strengthen the rules on term time holidays. Whilst head teachers should continue to have discretion, holidays in term time should be the exception rather than the rule. Well, we're actually not having them at all now. And obviously one of the questions in all of this is what pressure there is on head teachers from Ofsted to reduce the numbers. The numbers which were that 7.5% of absence, not of attendance, 7.5% of absence in primary schools was actually related to holidays, and 2.5% in secondary schools. And obviously if the head teachers are under pressure to reduce the numbers, then that's going to have an effect there. So we have to look at what the mechanisms are for change. One is for the government to produce guidance to say very clearly, for instance, that going to your great-uncle's funeral is a reasonable thing to do. Secondly, the government could actually introduce a new statutory instrument which changes the regulations. And then there is this final question as to whether a judicial review under Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, or using the UNCRC, which was the point raised in one of the other petitions, would be a system which could actually have an effect on that. Whatever it is, there is no doubt about it that there is a problem. I think the fact that so many constituents have highlighted it, that so many people have signed online petitions about it, demonstrates the problem. The solution, there are a number of solutions, working with the schools to stagger school holidays or changing the regulations. Whatever it is, we need to do something.
The question is that this House has considered the ePetition relating to holiday companies charging extra for school holidays. I'm looking for a speaker. Ms. Natasha Engel.
Well, thank you very much for calling me in this very important debate, and also thank you to my fellow committee member. When this e-petition came to us, we did recognise the importance of it, not just because it reached 100,000 signatures, but because of the number of people who talked to us in constituencies about this very issue. And I think his very comprehensive speech, which I hope I don't repeat any of, did highlight the fact that this is about individual cases. And I think having a big national policy that is supposed to apply to every single case. It's just not going to work. And I want to just very briefly use a couple of examples from my own constituency which highlight that actually a much more sensible policy would be to look at each individual case, each individual child and each individual parent of those children, and give the schools far greater discretion in when they are allowing people out of school and for how long. Absolutely, without a doubt, we all agree that education is crucially important, and that the more time a child misses from its education, the worse it is for that child. What we're not arguing for here, I don't think anybody's arguing for it, is an indiscriminate use of taking children out of school just because it's a little bit cheaper to go on holiday. Nobody is arguing for that. But what we are, I think, all of us saying, is that in those cases, and we are talking about those people who are least able to afford to go on holiday, who've already got the greatest pressures on them. And I'm talking about a constituent of mine, Tim Farmer, in Dronfield, who's written to me saying that he and his partner, you know, they kind of share the childcare by one of them starting work at 6 a.m, the other one finishing work at 11 a.m. They cannot afford ever to take their children on holiday during term time. And it means that the amount of pressure that's put on just on the family, just by not spending time together, heaped on top of the fact that they work these absolutely punishing hours, means that they never get the chance to spend any time together as a family. And that brings with it additional pressures, which put pressures on family life. And we are seeing, especially at a time of austerity, we are seeing more and more families breaking up. So I think we have to sort of look at the cost of the other side of not doing anything about this. I've also got a very distressing individual case where the response by the school says something about having a national policy not really working in individual cases, where this man is separated from his wife. His daughter, a 7-year-old girl, goes to school in the constituency, and he lives about 120 miles away and visits on alternate weekends. The girl has just been diagnosed with a brain tumour, and they don't know, you know, what's going to happen to this child. And he's asked the school whether he can take the girl out on holiday just for a week. And the school has cited government legislation to say there will be no unauthorised absences. It sounds quite threatening, but the school has no option. This is what the rules are. It says, as from 1st of September 2013, any holidays during term time will not be authorised unless there are exceptional circumstances for which there are set strict criteria. This is government policy, and parents who take their children on holiday without permission will incur unauthorised absences for their child. These remain on the child's record and will be monitored for further action by Education Welfare Service. Parents could be issued with a fixed penalty notice and or court action. I mean, that's quite threatening language, but this is national policy. Now, if a child with a brain tumour in the situation that she is in doesn't actually fall under that category of sort of a special case, then frankly I don't know what does. It would make far, far more sense to have Tim Farmer's children who've got 99%, 100% attendance at school. And as he points out, he wants the best for them. But he also says that going on holiday with a family provides a sort of a cultural experience and a sort of a broadening of horizon, and actually a sort of stability for the children that would also help them. And education is much, much wider than just what people get at school. Absolutely.
To know if any teacher or head teacher has approached her on this particular topic, and indeed in that particular instance if she has had a chance to speak to the head teacher of that school, because head teachers do have discretion.
Absolutely, and this is an ongoing piece of casework. I was really just citing this as an example of where actually this is kind of using a massive hammer to crack a nut. And I think it's all with, everything is with good intentions. We all want to have the best education for our children. We all know that the less time a child spends at school, the worse its outcomes will be. And there are lots and lots of different reasons for that. There are children from very chaotic families. There are children who truant. What we are talking about is actually looking at an individual child, the family circumstances and seeing whether it would be possible not to have a week a year taken out of school time, but having a week occasionally in order to make sure that that family can spend some quality time together. And I think actually I'm so glad that we're having this debate, because I think this will highlight, and I'm looking forward to hearing other individual cases from constituencies, but I think this will highlight that actually we do need to revisit this. Obviously we can't force holiday companies into making sure that they don't raise their prices during holiday times, but I think we do need to have a far more sensible and a pragmatic approach, and looking at giving schools far greater discretion of the types of children, the types of parents, and actually allowing families to have school holidays together. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Annette Brooks.
And I do agree with many of the points the Honourable Member's making. I have a concern about putting the onus onto head teachers without very good guidelines, because head teachers will find it very difficult, parent against parent, and I think you would get inconsistencies across areas and across the country. So I think what we need to do is to really dig into these criteria and guidelines that are issued.
Natasha Engel.
I think that's an excellent point, and I know the Honourable Lady's background in education. That's absolutely right. All I'm asking for is that we allow greater discretion. At the moment, there is not enough discretion, and I think that is why these issues are being raised with us as constituency MPs. Of course.
George Howard.
To my honourable friend, and I think I agree with her, but would she also agree with me that the problem in this is there are at least 3 different variables at work? There are those who, by virtue, including teachers, who by virtue of their employment don't have the opportunity, would never have the opportunities that others are seeking. There are those, and she's given some good examples, who their own employment makes it difficult for them to find space in it. And finally, but not least, not of lesser importance, is the requirements of schools to provide about the entire curriculum to all of the children, and coordinating that would be a problem as well. I think the idea of more discretion is good, but it needs to be underpinned by some basic principles about how all those different groups can be catered for.
Order. Before you continue, could I ask in future you face in this direction? Thank you. Natasha Engel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. I just think at the moment the problem that we have is that we've got one national policy that's supposed to apply to absolutely everybody, and it's just not working. I think the case of teachers, of police officers, of armed forces, and that there are lots and lots of these individual professions that will have problems with this. But I do think certainly the head teachers that I've met, you know, that they are they know their parents and they know the children. I mean, I don't think we want to have a situation where it becomes too easy to take children out of school, and there will obviously be abuses of that. What I am saying, though, is that in those cases where you have got the families with the lowest incomes, where you've got the greatest pressures just on family life, where a lot of these families are breaking up. Now, that is far worse for a child than just missing a couple of days of its education because it's gone on holiday. I think we really just need to look at that a lot more carefully. And I would agree with the Honourable Lady that it's really the guidelines that we need to look at much more carefully, and not, not kind of impose so harshly and with such a threatening tone on schools and on parents. The inability, actually, if you are on a very low income, ever to go on holiday, because I think that would be a great shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Turner. It's an absolute pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and as an MP representing a constituency that relies on the tourism industry, I presume this will be a very interesting and topical debate for yourself. And I'd like to pay tribute to my honourable friend for Birmingham Yardley for securing this debate. It's managed to attract over 200,000 signatures on petitions. I myself posted about this on Facebook and had 47 separate comments and suggestions from different residents, with over 3,000 views just within 72 hours. And there's a lot of very important things that we do in Parliament and don't attract quite as much interest, and that shows you the real strength of feeling with parents right across the country on a very real and live issue. And in my mind, this is split into three sections. First of all, it's looking at the holiday industry, which is why I presume that we have the Minister selected to respond to this debate. And there are some people who express concern at just how much there is an increase, a significant increase, and my honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley gave some very good examples between going on holidays during the school holidays and during term time. Though I have to say, some parents also said to me they felt that was a bit of a red herring. It probably does reflect supply and demand, because if a holiday firm can't actually sell the more expensive holidays, they'd be forced to drop those prices. I think one of the examples given to me was that Centre Parks relies on something like a 97% occupancy rate to be a viable business, so then the prices will reflect, yes.
I'm grateful, Mr Turner, for my own friend giving way, and as a representative for Bournemouth East, my default position is to support the tourism industry, but like many other colleagues, I've had letters on this subject, very concerned about the price of holidays. I just wonder whether my honourable friend would agree with me that perhaps a point made by the honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley about the coordination across the country. Is it really necessary for Dorset to have the same holiday timings as that of Yorkshire or that of Kent? Could we not stagger these a little bit so that supply and demand is spread over a longer period?
Friend for his intervention. Like Bournemouth, which is a fantastic place to go on holiday, your intervention was fantastic, because I'm coming on to that very point in a bit, and I've had very many enjoyable holidays in Bournemouth, so with pleasure.
I'm very grateful to him giving way, and the comment from the honourable gentleman in Bournemouth. I just say that we entirely support the idea of greater flexibility of different authorities, but can we just make sure that Derbyshire get the warmest months?
Brilliant. Derbyshire, what a fantastic place to also go on holiday. Let's just champion every constituency here. I think we're on safe ground and on cross-party support for championing the UK tourist industry. My feeling on this area is I do think we need to be 100% sure that there aren't some unscrupulous operators. But predominantly, I think we need to focus on the two other areas, which is discretion and flexibility. So starting on discretion, there is already confusion amongst a lot of parents. A lot of parents have contacted me to say, we have triggered fines, we feel that our decision to take our children outside of the school was justified. The school has come back and said, under the new rules, there is absolutely no discretion, you will be fined. And then, as a government representative, I've had to sort of almost feel obliged to apologise on behalf of the government. And yet, one of those schools that has sort of made that very clear, the chair of governors has actually said, no, actually there is discretion, and that we, through the pastoral team, will look, and we will look at those parents whose children have got excellent attendance records, are achieving well in school, and looking at the nature of the reason why they might be taken out of, obviously, a funeral compared to perhaps, say, a holiday without educational benefits. And it would be weighed up. But clearly there is confusion, and that needs to be resolved. And secondly, there is also the assumption that there is pressure from Ofsted, because whilst there's discretion, Ofsted, when rating a school, is looking at attendance records. And if a school decides to say that actually, because of cost pressures, because of work pressures, that we will allow a good level of discretion, actually their attendance records then don't look good. And I think that also needs to be looked at, because there is disincentive for a school to apply common sense discretion. And I think we'd all agree that perhaps discretion should apply where children are doing well, where parents are perhaps working during those school holidays. And my honourable friend for Portsmouth North, who is a real champion for the armed forces, highlights one particular career, but there are many, many others which I'm sure would apply right across our constituencies, where actually the only time that they can take their children out would be during the school time. And obviously, as we've all noticed, the actual physical cost of the peak holidays. But there are some challenges. I've been contacted by some teachers who said that they don't like being in the firing line. They don't like necessarily having the discretion, because if they feel that the child shouldn't be given that time off, that they're the ones who are blamed. And actually sometimes there are reasons why they shouldn't, because I've also been told that in the past, where it was the 10 days or 10 sessions discretion, some parents felt it was the automatic right to have that every year, and even if the child was struggling. And there was never a case where a parent would then say, you're absolutely right, I'll now withdraw that request. It would create heated discussion. So I think the suggestion earlier about very clear guidelines is an absolute must if we're going to go down and have a look at discretions. And also, we need to consider teachers, because whilst discretion can help pupils and parents, the teachers wouldn't be able to have discretion to then take time off during the time. So that's not necessarily a complete one-size-fits-all solution. And now looking at flexibility, and I'm a big fan of flexibility here, because one of the big suggestions is about having flexible term times. Now, I was contacted by a resident, Nikki Mitchell, about a year ago on this issue, and I suggested about flexible term times, and it was pointed out to me, well, what happens if you have a child in a primary school and you have a child in a secondary school and they have different term times? That's not going to make it. In fact, it will make it even harder. So, but I've had a number of residents who've contacted me to say that actually in Europe this does exist, and they do it by county or region by region. So we might decide that the southeast goes a couple of weeks earlier and the southwest goes a couple of weeks later. But they also then do it on rotation basis. So it's not always the southwest first off and the southeast off. Now I think not only would that help parents, not only would it help the children, but it would probably also help the tourist industry, because one of their challenges is, regardless almost of what they charge, they can fill up at peak time, but it's the rest of the year where they have a real challenge. And actually spreading that out across the year would be very helpful. Another suggestion, if we can't manage flexible term times, is perhaps extending the school year by 2 weeks and then allowing everybody automatically 2 weeks worth of discretion throughout the year. That would probably be incredibly unpopular with teachers who would then face an extra 2 weeks, but it was another suggestion and I thought I would, with pleasure.
Following what he's saying very closely, but would it not be the case that once a child has been away on holiday for 2 weeks, when they came back, there'd be a lot of catching up to do, and so you'd have all different children all trying to catch up at different times?
Yeah, and I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I think that applies with the actual general discretion. With any suggestion, there's a plus and there's a negative, which is why I think my personal choice would be to have those rotational, flexible term times, because it helps the children, it helps the parents, it helps the teachers, and it helps the tourist industry. So to me, it's a win-win right across. Long gone are the days when we all need to be available for harvest time. So I think, in conclusion, Mr. Turner, I would say that it's a pleasure to participate in this debate. This is something that has caught the public's imagination. It is a very serious issue. I don't think we'll necessarily get all the solutions today, and I actually think the key, and it was my honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley made this, is that the Education Select Committee should now pick up this baton after this debate. Take the speeches and comments that we've made. We will happily forward on all of the suggestions and comments from the residents that have contacted all of us in our respective constituencies. And I think this is something that can be looked at, and the government, with proactive, innovative, constructive way of looking at this, could make a real difference to people's lives. Thank you.
Damien Green.
I'm
sorry, Damien Hines.
Damien Hines. Thank you. And I'm very grateful for the elevation implicit in your introduction. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to see you, Mr. Turner, in the chair, and as was said earlier, representing the Isle of Wight as you do, one of the important tourist destinations in this country. Mr. Turner, this debate has already covered a number of very important subjects: the importance of family life and family time, the value of an education, that which you do without by missing part of education, but also the joy, the benefit of discovery through travel, and the health of the travel industry itself. I hope you'll forgive me, though, if I restrict my remarks mostly to the topic of the ePetition itself, which is whether or not to stop holiday companies charging extra in the school holidays. In the current tough times that we're in, of course, we are very focused in this Parliament on affordability of everything for families, and being able to spend time together away from home is one of them. In the words of the petition, family time is so much more essential in the current working world, but so many people cannot afford holidays in the school holidays, and a break at home is not the same as getting away from it all, where the focus is all on the family. Who could disagree with that? I also understand, Mr. Turner, why people would say, well, if holiday companies can make money charging price X in the winter, surely they must be able to make profit by charging the same price in the summer. And by charging a higher price, they must be making huge profits on the backs of other people. That's just not correct. If you charge the same in the summer as you did in the winter to a popular tourist destination, a sun-based tourist destination, you'd be out of business, and then nobody would be going on those holidays. It's also worth saying that what counts as a peak period in the travel business is partly determined by when school holidays are, but not entirely. Weather also plays a big part, and so does the timing of public holidays like Easter, Christmas, and in the case of this country, the bank holidays. A little bit of Google research this morning also revealed to me that on holidays where presumably there are no children involved and no school holidays therefore involved, there is also a big difference. In the couples, Thomas Cook couples retreat in Negril, Jamaica, the price goes up by 31% between June and August, and on the Ibiza Rocks clubbing holiday, Mr. Turner, you'll recall when we were there together recently, the price also rises by 31% between June and August. And I repeat, clearly, those prices, those differences are not driven by when the school holidays are. I have a confession to make, Mr. Turner. I come here before you today as a sinner because my job before coming to Parliament was mainly, I spent about a decade in the travel trade, mostly, I'm afraid, involved with pricing and what in the travel trade is called revenue management, which, I don't want to get into all the technical detail, but basically is the discipline of deciding what prices to offer, to whom, when, and, yeah, my fault, and for when, under what conditions, and to whom. For me, that was mostly in the hotel business, but the same principles actually apply whether it's hotels or airlines or most of the wide range of products involved in the travel business, basically anything where you've got high fixed cost assets, a perishable product, and fixed or semi-fixed capacity. And of course, hotels themselves are also suppliers to holiday companies. So even if you're a package operator, you're buying in capacity from typically from airlines, from hotels, from bus companies, and so on. And it's also worth bearing in mind that especially in the foreign travel market, it's an international market. And to some extent, as a packager, you are a price taker. Nobody in this country decides the market rate of a hotel room in Spain in the high season. And even if we believe that the prices that British companies charge for holidays, I don't think anybody would suggest that Spanish hoteliers are within the control of Her Majesty's government. It's also worth bearing in mind that because of the international nature of particularly resort-based travel, everything that everyone said already about when the German holidays are and the French holidays are and all the rest, that's already factored into the price. Because if you've got resorts that people are coming to from different countries, the demand is an amalgam of all the incoming traffic from those different places. So, Mr. Turner, I confessed that I came here as a sinner, but I have not, in fact, come here to confess, I'm afraid, because the simple fact is, and I don't anticipate a popularity boost as a result of my appearance in Westminster Hall this afternoon, but the simple fact is that these, to some extent, a large extent, are the laws of economics, and there is no single market-clearing price year-round in holiday resorts. I will happily give way.
Mrs. Annette Brooks.
I do thank the member for giving way, and I simply have a question drawing on his expertise. I absolutely accept that we've got supply and demand issues, and if we attempt to interfere too much, we'll just be getting touting and so on. But does his analysis actually include the reasons for the really steep rises on particular days, which do seem to coincide with school holidays?
Damien Hines.
She is correct. They do coincide with school holidays, and to some extent it is the existence of holidays that create those spikes. Those holidays, they also themselves coincide with the high season, as it were, with the times when actually, as I was outlining earlier, in terms of holidays marketed to couples, to older people, to singles, to groups, to clubbers, those prices also go up, typically in late July and August, because that is the most popular time of the year to visit, particularly European sun-based resort destinations. Now, Mr. Turner, this is no place to start deconstructing the profit and loss account of a holiday company. But I do think there's one really key concept to this debate, and that's the concept of contribution to profit. I'm going to talk about hotels, but exactly the same logic applies to airlines and all those other travel products. The actual direct marginal cost of someone staying in a hotel room is actually rather low. Globally, it might be somewhere between 15 and 20 US dollars. Meaning that's the cost of laundering the towels and the sheets and giving the soap and doing the heat, light and power and all the rest of it. So on one level, if you charge anything over $20, you're making a profit. The problem is there's a whole lot of other costs called fixed costs, which in the case of an airline or a hotel, the biggest one of all is the existence of the building or the existence of the aircraft, and the loan repayments don't go up and down. If you take all those costs together, the cost per night or the cost per stay goes up from that $20 to, say, about $100. So it's a big, big difference. Now, in the off-season, you might sell your hotel room for $80 a night, or $70, or $60, or $50. In other words, deliberately making a loss. Why would you do that? Because as long as you're charging more than the $20, which is the direct marginal cost, you're making a contribution to profit. If you tried to charge the profitable rate, the $100, you wouldn't sell a room.
Julian Lewis. I fully appreciate the argument of my honourable friend that as it were, the rich seasons are what helps the airline and the tourist industry to function during the off seasons. However, what does he think would happen if some flexibility were introduced so that schools in different areas took the school holidays at different times? Would he anticipate the prices remaining low during those times, or would he anticipate the travel industry increasing the prices, given that there had been that new expansion of the season concerned?
He makes an important point. I'm going to come on to that. I mean, the short version of the answer is, that would be something that would be very welcomed by the travel business, because it would extend the season, it would be good for capacity utilisation, and there would be an effect, but it would not be nearly as big as I think a lot of people are anticipating, because you may extend the season by a week or 2 weeks. Those are still going to be shoulder periods. They're not going to be peak periods, and so there will be a difference, but not that huge a difference. Happy.
He makes a very important point, the responsibility of the the travel industry as a whole, the tourist industry, to make sure that they set their prices accordingly. But I do recall that during the Olympics, there was a concern that many hoteliers in London actually increased their prices too high, and it did in fact put people off. I just wonder whether he has thoughts on whether that should be rationalised, and also to do with not just the period of Olympics, but one-off events. I do recall actually wanting to stay in Manchester, but as soon as they found out that the party conference might be there, suddenly their price shot up.
Yes. My older friend for Bournemouth is, of course, correct in identifying this problem. Price gouging is a problem, and it's something that, from a regulatory perspective, most countries in the world actually have laws against it, which I'll come to. But also, if you're a brand owner, if you're a company, you have an interest in not doing those things. I mean, it can be even worse than the Olympics. It can be when there's been a natural disaster or something. Yes. And people absolutely have to stay, and they are being ripped off, and that's a bad thing. It's why rack rates exist. Rack rate is the terminology for the rate that appears on the back of a door on a hotel, which is the maximum amount you can charge in law. Most European countries, the United States, most advanced economies have that system in hotels. But you're right, price gouging can remain a problem. The summary of the position, Mr. Turner, is that leisure travel companies have to make more money in the peak periods in order to cover the losses that you would, or the marginal cost losses that you would make in the off-season. The definition of a peak period is when most people want to travel, and that is, as I say, partly determined, but not wholly determined, by when school holidays are. I think actually it's inconceivable. I'd be interested to hear from the Honourable gentleman from Chesterfield when he stands up, but I think it's pretty inconceivable that any British government of whatever political persuasion would impose price controls on the British-based travel business. But if they did, you would have a combination of, firstly, firms going out of business, and actually plenty of holiday companies go out of business anyway because margins can be really rather thin across the year. And secondly, capacity in foreign resorts just not being made available to British tourists at all, and instead being sold to people from other countries. And that, of course, means the disastrous consequence of more German towels on loungers, which we all can unite around avoiding. So what are the alternatives? And I just want to talk, I've spoken too long, I just want to talk very briefly about some of these debates about taking children out of school and about school holidays. Taking children out of school, of course, you can see the argument that says times are tough, people really struggle to go on holiday, they want to take their kids out of school. One thing that hasn't come up yet in the debate so far, education in this country is free, but that doesn't mean it has no cost. The average cost of educating a child is about £4,500 a year, which covers 190 school days or 38 weeks. Now, my very basic maths, that works out at about £120 worth of value per child per week. So if you have two children at school, you take them both out of school for a fortnight to go on holiday, that's £480 worth of value foregone in the education of that child. And that's not value that can be transferred to the education of another child. It's value foregone forever, because the salary of the teacher All the other things to go around running the school are there, and they're just missed out on by that child. And also, children do fall behind if they miss part of their education. And in the context of a school term, even a week or 2 weeks is a reasonably big chunk of time. And if you think about multiplying it over the lifetime, if every year from year R to year 13 you took a fortnight out from school, that works out as 28 weeks, which is around 3/4 of an academic year. So it's the equivalent, if you like, just to put it in physical terms, of saying to that one child, you'll do your GCSEs at the beginning of fifth form, the beginning of year 11, rather than at the end. So what are the options instead? Well, one that nobody else has mentioned either is counter-cyclical travel. If you go to places which actually have most of their demand in the wintertime or business periods in the summer, you can get quite a good deal. And there are those places in this country, particularly business-focused destinations. Lots of places, travel in or something like that. And anywhere in this country, within 40 minutes, you'll find lots of fabulous things to visit with the family. But the holiday variation... File coast? The file coast being... I don't know, is the file coast? Yes, I'm sure it is. But the big thing, of course, that people will be talking about is about varying holidays. It's an intrinsically very attractive prospect, although, as I was mentioning, you're never going to move them that far, because August is August, and August is the warmest time of year in Europe. Christmas is Christmas. You might have a little bit of flexibility around whether or not the Easter holiday actually takes place at Easter, but you're not, if you're a teacher, you're not going to want the first half term to be 40% of the term and the second half term to be 60% of the term because of all the implications that has for education. But you could do it to some extent. My own recommendation would be not to try and do it by big area, because some of the other advantages to having staggered holidays like road capacity usage and train capacity usage, you would lose some of those if everyone in a massive area did so at once, but you could do on kind of sub-regional levels. I'm just not sure it needs a big national plan, because schools already, under this government's reforms, increasingly have the freedoms, have the abilities to vary these things. And there's nothing to stop schools in an area getting together, like the Education Improvement Partnership in my area, getting together and saying, actually, yeah, we're going to do it slightly differently in order to give a bit more room for parents in our area. It won't solve the whole problem. It won't make holidays in August cost the same as holidays in April. There's a limited amount of money, movement, and I'm afraid at the end of the day, we just can't change when the sun shines. Very good.
George, good.
Next Tourism Minister.
For obtaining this debate, and the generous lady sitting beside me who actually chaired the committee who gave you it. But it is a very serious problem, But before we start delving into, and I really enjoyed a very sensible and humorous speech from the preceding member from East Hampshire, but very logical and grounded. And that's, I think, the point we should put in front of us at the moment. There is a problem, but I suggest that if we went back 2 years ago, we wouldn't be in this place. There were other problems forcing their way to this place, and this was not one. So what on earth has happened? And the person I feel most sorry in this room, Mr. Turner, is the Minister from Biz, because this has been seen as a biz problem, a business problem. The poor minister is coming, and I don't believe that it is a business problem. I think it's an educational problem. It is a problem caused, and forces us here by that great Department for Education. And if anybody should be sitting explaining why we're sitting here and why people are going through all these problems, it should be a Minister for Education. And I do disagree with my honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley about a select committee. This doesn't need a select committee. It doesn't deserve a select committee. It deserves that Secretary of State in the DFE to just withdraw the regulations that he slipped through when nobody was looking, that's caused so much pain all over the country. And it has genuinely caused pain, Mr. Turner, because it is one of the things I'd say straight away to some people's unhappiness, but I don't accept the petition. I accept the petition, but I don't accept the remedy, because I think you'd forgive me saying, the honourable member for Yardley would forgive me, Birmingham Yardley would forgive me saying, It brings back memories of Shirley Williams, or Lady Williams, I suppose I should call her, when she was Price's minister. Are we actually suggesting that we could cap? Well, I'll tell you what we would have to cap. The Guardian did a snapshot supporting the argument about the seasonal differences of prices. 4 nights at Woburn Forest, this is free advertising for some institutions. 4 nights at Woburn Forest, Bedfordshire Lodge accommodation, a 51% increase. Disneyland Paris is 7%. So it's not about foreign flights, foreign people. It's about seasonal, it's about business, and it's about demand and supply. And if you're trying to control that, I think you're going to land yourself in... And in fact, I should also mention, one king once said, Bogger Bogner. I don't know if I'll get into trouble, but if the king can say it, I think I can say it. 4 nights at Bognor Regis Resort, hotel accommodation, a 99% increase between the week before holidays go off and the week the schools come off for holiday. In a week, a 99%. And you're not going to defend Bognor Regis, are you?
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Just ask him, I agree with the honourable gentleman that the regulations that the government have brought forward to allow for fines or to require fines on parents have exacerbated the problem. Does he share my concern that they have effectively strengthened the monopoly that there is in the holiday period by making it ever more difficult for parents to make to have any kind of flexibility? And often we're not talking about parents taking 2 weeks out, year in, year out. We're talking about looking at a couple of days or even an afternoon off to get a slightly cheaper flight. But that flexibility has been lost.
George Moody.
There's a tremendous amount being lost, but it's not from BIS, it's from the DFE, and my honourable friend is absolutely right. I am, I'll catch your eye in a moment, if I may. My wife is a teacher, head teacher now, but she's been a teacher since I married her. And so we've gone through every family holiday we've has had to be at the most expensive time to take holidays. Now, we were 2 salaries, so we could afford it. But I well understand what happens to families who are just on the breadline, or even families who are struggling with a mortgage, struggling with one is unemployed at the moment or short time. You can understand what's going to happen. If they've got children, if they're going to take a holiday, and it doesn't matter whether it's abroad, as the figures show, or in this country, they will, by taking it during a summer holiday, a school holiday, face inflated prices. Now, I do challenge, it would be, we're talking about doing things for schools, how we'd work out whether to give kids a week off or something, and we need regulations. I don't know what kind of regulations we'd need to actually regulate prices, and a Labour government tried it in the 60s and failed miserably. And I think it's so. I mean, and then if you think the offshoot of other things, railways, we all have the choice of travelling during the day, off-peak, or travelling at peak times. And you know the difference in prices. So you also know, coming to London, if you're booking a hotel on a Tuesday, it's a different price at a weekend. And it's just business, it's just supply and demand. Oh, sorry. I'm sure.
I thank both honourable gentlemen for giving way.
Any more?
We're all here this afternoon because we know the public are very aggrieved at this, and we want to do something to alleviate that. And I think that, but I would urge the drive to attack the Department of Education for this. I can point to schools who have no problem at all in exercising discretion under the current regulations with members of the armed forces and all sorts of other people who are those exceptional cases. I think actually the real problem is those people that aren't those exceptional cases but might have relatives that live in a particular country, and so they don't have the choice that others might have over the destination for their holiday. And that is actually an issue for the Department of Business. It's to look at those costs, and particularly the costs of flights, in my opinion, and to look at whether the markup that's being made is actually reasonable.
I don't challenge the last part, but I do still think we would face the regulators with a very difficult job unless there's the Olympics were mentioned, unless there's a specific factor. I really do think we would have some difficulty, and as is suggested, you have to take it in the round. If you were running a business, it's easy to criticise them, but they have to make a profit to stay alive. And if during the other 46 weeks in the year they're running below capacity, when they hit capacity, I'm not sure, well, I'm sure just to stay in business they have to even it out. And so I genuinely have some difficulty in doing it. But I also do, but I think I'd like to come on to the DFE, because I think that's where the problem lies. But I'd like to thank and congratulate the people who started the petition. It's interesting, the individual who's got the fame of starting the petition was not complaining about a foreign holiday, but centre parks in this country. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank my friend for giving way. He's making an excellent speech. I wanted to just flag with him another sort of case that has been raised by parents in my constituency who have an autistic child who struggles to go on holiday abroad when it's very busy and there's lots of other kids. So they're in a specific position that I'm not sure whether that would be deemed to be exceptional or not, except to say that I do think it makes the case that there needs to be more flexibility in the educational world, as he's been saying. And I would just ask him if he agrees with me that whilst, of course, we must think of the cost that's lost in the amount being paid for a child's education, if we're to be proper in our analysis, we must think of the opportunity cost of that child's time with their parents.
George Moody.
I think I'll come to that, to answering my honourable friend, when I come on to the DFE, but I just want to make the point that I was thanking the individual and the people who have signed the petition because they've performed a very great feat in putting it into the public consciousness and the public arena and the political arena. But I think we would be making a grave mistake if we chased after Biz, and from the answer they gave the petition, I'm sure they wouldn't bother if we chased after them, because it's quite a dusty answer they gave us. But I have some sympathy for them. But the people who should be answering are in the DFE. So, but I think I'll give way.
The Honourable Judge has been terribly generous. I meant that he should have actually concluded his sentence before kindly giving way. But I'm slightly conflicted over the whole issue because he's made the point about people needing to save money. And indeed, I have a constituent, Joy Drake, who took her children in a once-in-a-lifetime holiday and saved £1,000 on the airfares. But does he not agree that if it's just left to the individual head teacher or the individual school, that's going to put them in an invidious position as to deciding which families get to save on the airfares and which families don't? And therefore, shouldn't we really be looking at something which enables the discretion to be applied, other than, of course, when we're talking about bereavements and things like that, but the general discretion to be applied as to when the holiday is taken by everyone, rather than just this flexibility on an individual case by an individual head teacher?
George Moody.
I think that's a very important point, but I still would like to just finish, if I could remember, about one of the things that has come from this petition is a request from the travel industry, the tourist industry, to get together with the government and local authorities and see if they can work something out to help alleviate the problem. And it's been mentioned on a couple of occasions, more than a couple of occasions, the question of regional staggering, it's called. That's one thing the industry has put forward that they would wish to talk about. But they've actually asked for talks. And one thing I would look at the BIS for is an acceptance of that invitation and to get them round the table as soon as possible and start talks. I say that not because a quick solution would be forthcoming, but it will take such a time to get a solution that the sooner they start, the better. But let me go back to my honourable friend. We get in this place roles reversed at such a speed that it's bewildering. If I were standing here giving the education policy of the future Labour government, it would all be, you don't trust the professionals. Oh, leave it to the doctors, leave it to the teachers. When the solution is, and it comes from a Labour member of Parliament, about trusting head teachers, suddenly that's not enough. Now, I've discussed this ad nauseum more than anything else in the past week with my wife, who's a head teacher, and all I get is common sense, and I think none of us would be prepared to stand up here and say, particularly as 2 weeks ago my wife had Ofsted in at 24 hours notice. Head teachers have great discretion, on the whole have great judgment and great empathy, have great relations with their parents, know the parents, look at the attendance records and can do all the things that have been suggested as a matter of common sense and as a matter of being a good head running a good school. And I'd be content to leave it at that. And I would like members, anybody to indicate they had a problem with kids' attendance for the school, for taking an in-term holiday. Where were the letters about it? Where was the complaints about it? Where were the public complaints about it? They weren't there. It was not a problem. And what did the Secretary of State do? And I don't want to make it political because I'd be gently asking him for once in his life just to act with a bit of humility and take it off the table. So I don't want to make it easy for him not to do it by being political. But that's all he needs to do because it was okay. But anyway, because of the fuss that's gone, because of the hurt that's happened, why shouldn't he just take it off the table? He's caused it, so he has in his hands a remedy, and if he wants change, then he gets together with all the parties, because even the trade, the business, the travel trade are saying, we're going to have to lay people off because it's affecting our business. Now, what did he do? He put this through without any real consultation. What did he do worst of all? No, worst of all. No, not the worst of all. What he did was he pushed it through for last year's in September to operate, but people had made their arrangements for holidays, taken the advice of the travel trade and got in quick, seeking the cheapest booking, and suddenly it was illegal to do it. So there was no consultation. It was peremptorily introduced, smuggled through the House of Lords and our Statutory Committee on Statutory Instruments. So, and then the second worst, if I say, he fines the parents. He fines the parents. £60 if you do this. It could be £120 if you're late in paying. And not only that, Mr. Turner, I see you nod, it could get worse than that, because they can fine both parents £60. So it could be 240. Now, some of my parents, I've only got two parents, I hasten to say, I think. So some of my wife's parents, £60 or £120 is more than they have to keep their family in food and clothing and housing. And this is now, and if you think that's bad, Mr. Turner, he's actually made it a criminal offence. So not only do you get fined, not only do you use your chance to bond with your kids on a beach somewhere, a whole family, you actually get a criminal record because of this. It's not just picking chewing gum off the floor and getting one of these neighbourhood wardens to give you a £60 fine. You've got a criminal record. Now, we did all that. And I just think, Mr Turner, there's not an easy solution. We need Biz to actually get these talks going, but we need this withdrawn, and we need, if he's worried about it, and why should he be worried about it? Ofsted go in the schools, the professionals are frightened stiff of Ofsted, no matter how good they are, they're frightened stiff of them. They can come in, they can see all the records, they go through every record, they can see whether a child who's an exemplary record of attendance is going to have their parents fined, because the parents, to get together, have to take it out of in term. Now, Ofsted can see that. Ofsted have all the figures on attendance, all the figures on performance. And so all the machinery is there to back up a responsible head being allowed to take the decision in the full knowledge of what happens in the school, and, most important, be answerable to Ofsted when they come in over this youngster getting it and that youngster getting it. So, Mr Turner, I hope that Biz will get these talks going, and I hope that the Secretary of State for the DFE withdraw this statutory instrument.
Laura Burt.
Thank you, Mr Turner. And can I add my thanks to my honourable friend and next-door neighbour from Birmingham Yardley, and indeed to the chair of the Backbench Committee for bringing what's a very, very important debate for parents all over the United Kingdom today. There's no dispute in any corner of this House about the importance of education. It's been a terribly long time since I was at school, but I don't recall my parents ever taking me out of school, and I never took my children out of school. We were fortunate in that we managed to scrape the money together to take our children on holiday, generally just a week, but nevertheless, you know, we did have that benefit. So it should be avoided, but I think there are times when circumstances do warrant allowing a child to go, and many honourable members today have talked about the different circumstances that they might be. I'd like to comment on my sinner friend here on my left from East Hampshire, talking about the pricing for holiday companies. And they will price what the market will stand. And much as we might disapprove of what holiday companies charge, and there does seem to be a great disparity between one company and another in the price hikes that they actually put on during school holidays, we can't order holiday companies, we can't restrict them in what they are prepared to charge, because it's all to do with the rules of competition. But I would just want to make one point, and that is that by further restricting the number of children who can be on holiday outside normal school times, then the demand for those school holidays rises, and it's a good excuse for some companies to hike up the price even further, which is very regrettable. I'd like to ask my honourable friend the Minister for some clarification. In September 2013, the ruling became that head teachers can only grant leave in exceptional circumstances, and various members have had comments about what constitutes exceptional. You know, is it laid down, is it defined? And so I'd be grateful to my honourable friend if she could outline to the House exactly what is meant by exceptional circumstances. I'd like to mention the review which was done by Mr. Charlie Taylor, on which this statutory instrument was based. And I wonder if my honourable friend could confirm that there was no consultation of parents and no consultation of businesses before this actually took place. Because there are circumstances, and we've heard this afternoon, I won't repeat them, seasonal workers. I know that, not many people have to be there for the harvest, but nevertheless, there are all kinds of seasonal workers in our economy. Armed forces we've heard about, children with disabilities, and businesses as well. I mean, this is a biz subject because businesses also employ parents, and if you have a lot of parents in your business, then can they all manage to be away at the same time? I know it's a real problem in my own office, in my own constituency office. Yes, by all means.
The Honourable Lady makes a very important point about the consultation, and I'll be interested to hear what the response is about whether any consultation did take place. But can she add to her list parents and children where they have family overseas? And I've had constituents come to see me and say it's incredibly important to see their family abroad, but actually that can be really difficult, particularly if they're the other side of the world, if they don't have any real flexibility about that.
Well, indeed, I'll be delighted to add that to my list, particularly where myself and my honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley come. We have a large element of the Asian diaspora based in our areas as well. I also just wanted to raise the fact that previously heads were able to authorise a 10-day, and I do believe it was 10 days, in maintained schools and also academies. But there is no jurisdiction over the private school sector. And a statistic came to my attention. Academies normally work for 190 days a year, and private sector schools work for an average of 165 days a year. So I just think that there's a measure of irony there, that the children who've got the wealthiest parents actually get the most choice as to when they are actually able to go on holiday. Yes.
To the issue of 10 days, hopefully, when I speak, but she'll recognise that the regulation sets aside for special circumstances as opposed to exceptional in the previous regulations. Can she illustrate what she considers to be special circumstances?
Well, it's semantic difference as to what is special and what is exceptional. And I go back to the comments made by the Honourable Gentleman from Leeds East in terms of head teachers actually should be authorised to have the common sense to know what the circumstances are of each individual family in their care, and they should have a greater degree of autonomy. I mean, it seems slightly ironic to me that in our coalition government we are seeking to repatriate all kinds of powers to schools over curriculum, over management and control. But here is an example where we're actually bringing the discretion out of schools. And it just doesn't seem right to me that that is what we, as a coalition government, are doing. Yes, by all means.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. Wouldn't she accept, though, that exactly that point, that discretion is with the head teachers to define what counts as special? A number of my constituents who contacted me about this debate have said that they want to take their children out in circumstances which would be very educational for them, to see other cultures and to go to other places which could help to inform their education. Wouldn't you accept that special circumstances could include that definition, and it should be at the discretion of head teachers under these regulations to interpret it that way?
Well, I would indeed. And I don't think that there is anyone better qualified than the head teacher to make these definitions. It's clear that from the comments of honourable members around the chamber that some head teachers appear to be cowed by this definition of exceptional circumstances. So I do think that, if my honourable friend, the Minister, can give us some guidance on that, it would be very helpful for head teachers all over the country. And I just wanted to talk for a moment as well about some of the statistical evidence, because we're putting into place something which could be described as a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Because before the rules changed, authorised family holidays were 7.5% of all absences in primary schools. That actually works out at 0.4% of all sessions missed. This has been quoted before, but the 2.5%, it goes down when a child goes to secondary school, and I think that's because parents do recognise the importance, the additional importance of their child's education as they do progress. But that 2.5% of all absences actually translates into 0.1% of all sessions missed. So I'm just wondering whether these should be the families that we should be penalising. Absence for family holidays is actually lower for parents who are persistently who are the parents of persistently absent pupils. So that's another thought that, you know, these are not the same kind of irresponsible parents that allow their children not to attend school. And I just do think that we need to have some proportion there. So in conclusion, Mr Turner, what I would ask my honourable friend the Minister is, please can we have some kind of definition of exceptional? Can more precise and balanced and sensible advice be given to guide head teachers in their decision making? And finally, you know, I find myself in agreement with the honourable gentleman from Leeds East. Heads know their pupils. They know how to exercise common sense. And please, can we make sure that the guidance that we give to head teachers actually reflects that sensible responsibility that we give to them in so many areas of running school life? Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thank you, Mr Turner. It's a great pleasure to contribute to this debate, which I had not planned to do at 4:30, but I feel motivated having heard some of the speeches that have been given. I'd like to congratulate, first of all, by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Yardley. I think he was right to take up this debate. It is an important debate, as recognised by the fact that many parents have signed the petition, and it deserves time in Parliament. I think, with respect to my honourable friend from Solihull, what I think she said in her closing paragraph in this speech was that she wanted head teachers to have discretion, but she wanted guidance from the department on what constituted exceptional is part of the issue that we are facing. If I go back with a little bit of history just to explain some of the situation, given that the member for Corby is still in his place, he may be aware that it was the Section 23 of the 2003 Anti-Social Behaviour Order Act that introduced the power to education authorities to issue penalty charge notices in cases of unauthorised absences. And to get over my confusion, I was mistaken in what I said earlier about 10 days. That power is automatically triggered when there are 10 sessions, which effectively equates to 5 days of unauthorised absence. And that is what triggers the penalty charge notice, which was already the case before this particular SI was introduced last year. But I think it does come back to this idea about what is special and what is exceptional. The 2006 regulations refer to the 10 days leave, up to 10 days leave, to be granted by the head teacher in their consideration of what constitutes special circumstances. What the 2013 regulation did was to remove all those references to when people could be away, but said that the head teacher is the person that could grant leave of absence in exceptional circumstances. And it's getting in, as was pointed out by my old friends in Solihull, the difference between exceptional and special is somewhat semantics. And I'm not sure that it's right for the Department for Education to define one or the other, but as consistently been said, it is appropriate for the head teacher to define whether or not somebody can take their child out of school. Sure.
The Honourable Lady makes an important point. Would she agree that part of the problem, notwithstanding the principle, part of the problem of doing this through a statutory instrument is that there isn't the debate that there would be otherwise if this were, say, primary legislation, or if indeed there'd been a proper consultation or more informal debate in the chamber about the meaning of these terms, which could then have been critical both for the head teachers and for members in understanding what is meant and what the effect of the SI will be.
Well, I don't profess to be an expert on parliamentary procedure and why certain bits of legislation are introduced according to negative resolution as opposed to affirmative resolution. That tends to be defined in the original Act. I don't know who was responsible for the very original Act. I don't know if it goes back to 1944. I don't know if it goes back to 2006. But that's when the process is decided of how future secondary legislation is introduced. He will be aware, as my honourable friend from Birmingham Yardley pointed out, any member of this House, or indeed of the other place, can trigger a stay on any regulation on negative resolution by signing an EDM. And that is a mechanism that we all have. I recognise that means MPs have to be even more on the ball by checking what resolutions are up for affirmative or negative resolution, but that information is made available to every member of the House in the vote bundle. Going back to the issue about exceptional or special, I don't have children, so I don't pretend I have to face this issue. I have had 6 parents contact me, 4 of which cite cost, one of which, by the way, in one of those situations, teachers are given activities for the children to do while they were away from school. Another one was about getting time together with the other parent. And then the 6th person contacted me. It was about parental choice. It was for parents to decide when their children would go on holidays and not schools, and that teachers could make up the time and children could be given special projects to do that. I'm not sure that that's acceptable behaviour necessarily. I fully understand the issue about cost, but I've no idea why special versus exceptional makes a difference for the head teacher in assessing that decision. Now, where I was involved in children's education, it was that I was being a school governor in 2 different schools in my time. And we did discuss this in quite lengthy detail. I won't say which, because it would be unfair on the head teacher. But it had almost seemed to become a right for parents to request the time off, and that the head teacher would basically be given a very hard time by the parents unless they did give these up to 10 days of leave. And we felt that was wrong in terms of putting pressure on the head teacher. It was wrong in terms of putting pressure on the classroom teacher, having to cope with a child being away for 10 days, having missed 10 days of schooling while they were away. And there is no doubt that there is a strong link from a school's attendance records and indeed attainment at that school. Of course, it is you cannot prove this for every single child, but I think it is fair to say that I can tell from the schools in my constituency where attendance rates are significantly below the average, I also see a significant difference in the attainment of children. And that, I think, is something that we need to consistently stand up for. It's not simply necessarily about that individual child education is really important, but also the impact on children also in the classes. And I think that needs to be remembered. Mr. Turner, I hadn't planned to speak, and I recognise I don't wish to extend the debate unduly. But I do believe that these regulations that were introduced last year still leave the head teacher with appropriate discretion for them to use, whether it's children with military parents. Let me finish the sentence and I will come back to him. Whether it's children with military parents, whether it's about children who, where their parents wish them to attend a funeral, that situation is still the case. There would be no automatic right of a parent to remove a child in that case, unless they, of course, wish to go down the unauthorised absence route. But I think that by changing the focus to be putting it clearly in the regulation, it has to be exceptional circumstances. That sets the right expectation of parents that it's not a right of theirs to take a child out for up to 10 days holiday as referred to in the regulation, but it should be for exactly what it says. If there is no other opportunity for a particular situation to happen, then I would expect head teachers to use their discretion. And frankly, if MPs hear of cases where does not seem to be being applied, then we should be taking that up on behalf of the parent. I give way to my honourable friend.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way on this point. I think she probably would agree with me, and she may confirm this, that a funeral is something she would see as being a valid use of exceptional circumstances. And would she agree with me we perhaps should have concerns that maybe Ofsted is putting pressures on head teachers to reduce the numbers so low that they can't even take into account exceptional circumstances?
Well, I'm not aware that Ofsted is applying that particular pressure, but I would agree with him. I would be very surprised if a head teacher refused that, and I'd be disappointed. So I share his disappointment in that regard. I must admit, though, on a slight aside, I was disappointed when a whip initially refused me permission to be away to attend a funeral, but when I made my representation directly, he certainly changed his mind. It was, I think, one of the things that we need to consistently support are our teachers who want to give the best education possible to children, not to remove unnecessary pressures from head teachers. Now, I welcome any talks that may happen about seasonal pricing of education, but I do encourage us to stand firm and to ensure that we put education first on this debate.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. McRae. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. You've only just had the opportunity to join us, but I assure you, you've missed an excellent debate, which I will attempt to do some sort of justice to in my own modest way. But you might choose to read members' words for yourself later. I'd also like to start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Birmingham Yardley for bringing this issue here, the way in which he presented it. Clearly the strength of opinion that has been articulated during this debate, and in fact the size of the petitions and the testimony that we heard from honourable members shows how important and how right he was to bring that. And a couple of people have reflected the fact that I and the honourable lady are responding as a business shadow minister, and indeed the initial petition was very much looking at the business aspect of this, and the honourable gentleman was right to say that from the point when the initial petition first went onto the ePetition system to this day, the whole aspect of the debate has changed, and in fact that was reflected in the debate, which didn't speak that much about the business aspect, but focused very much more on the educational policy, which maybe leaves me at a slight disadvantage. This is an issue of great concern for my constituents, many of whom have taken the opportunity to raise it with me at my weekly surgeries on email, and also at the school gate. And indeed, during the summer survey that I did, I raised questions about the changes, and it was very powerfully demonstrated to me how strongly people feel about this. And we all know how desperately difficult is that balance between wanting our children to be in school at all times and the huge increase in the cost of holidays during school holiday time. So it's no surprise to me at all that 150,000 people across the country took action by signing the online petition and demanding that MPs discuss this issue today. And I think that's the reason why we've had so many valuable contributions from all members, from members on all sides, and I'd like in a moment to touch on those. But I think that a situation has been created where many families who haven't previously faced a dilemma of how to afford an annual summer holiday, finding themselves sort of financially squeezed and wondering now how to do so. And all of us know how important school holidays together can be for a family. We're an incredibly time-poor nation, and often many people are stretched. We really struggle to have time with our families. A huge number of pressures on us. And those family holidays are incredibly important. And when people feel that the opportunity to go on those holidays has been removed, it's, that is tremendously difficult for them. So I think we all recognise how important that is. I think the Honourable Member from Birmingham Yardley was right to say that this is another demonstration of how powerful e-petitions can be, and a demonstration of the way in which the things that we don't necessarily immediately see the significance of can be demonstrated very powerfully to us by our constituents, and the response of the petitions was right and demonstrated the importance of this issue. Now, he also raised the issue about staggering holidays. That's something that many honourable members referred to, and I think it is an important part of the whole equation. My colleagues in the Education Department have been looking at that issue and very much exploring how greater flexibility can be given to schools, and hearing very powerfully the point that we don't want situations, parent like myself who's got one child in secondary school, one child in primary school, don't want to find that schools are on holiday at different times. But can we, on a more systematic basis, try and stretch out the holiday season, recognising that here in this country we're not blessed with sunshine all year round as they are in some areas, but nonetheless is there a way that we can stagger that and try and take a bit of pressure off that. And the Honourable Gentleman also referred to the fact that this is an issue that's been being debated in this place since right back in the mid-60s. So it's interesting to question why it is now that people are feeling so very strongly about that. And I think that the issue about the broader pinch that people are feeling at this moment and about some of the issues about the way that the holiday market has changed in recent years, as well as the recent changes to government education policy, are some of the reasons why an issue that maybe to an extent has been a hoary old chestnut for 40 odd years is now coming and being discussed very, very powerfully. Now, in the debate, the Honourable Lady from Portsmouth North, and it was repeated a moment ago, suggested that discretion did exist. And the Honourable Lady from Solihull raised an important question about what actually constitutes exceptional circumstances. But we heard in the debate some of the types of examples that haven't been considered to be exceptional circumstances. And my honourable friend from Wirral South spoke about a child with autism who might have very specific reasons why they wouldn't want to be on holiday at a time where it is the most crowded, but that wasn't considered to be exceptional circumstances. My honourable friend from North East Derbyshire highlighted the case of someone who had a child with a brain tumour that wasn't considered by the head teacher to be exceptional circumstances. The honourable gentleman from New Forest East highlighted someone who was exceptionally busy during the school holiday time because of the kind of business that they were in. They weren't considered exceptional circumstances. So, what is clear, I think, in this is that there has been a change in policy, and that has been communicated by government quite deliberately and right to do so. But at the same time that they have exercised that right, it has had an impact in the way that policy has been implemented. Now, one of the things that I noticed was interesting in this whole debate was that there were no contributions made by any members of Parliament for Scotland, unless we count Corby as being a representative of that nation, but no representatives from Scotland. It's not entirely surprising because they do have holidays at a different time of the year and probably benefit quite nicely from the fact they will go on holiday in July when the prices are cheaper than they are for the rest of us in England. So I think that was an interesting observation that I would make. In addition to the speech by the Honourable Gentleman, I'd like to reflect on some of the other contributions made, which I think has been a really excellent debate. My honourable friend from North East Derbyshire said, and I think it was something that was repeated by many colleagues, that we all share right across the House the vital importance of children being in school, and we recognise what a disadvantage it is to children when they are out of school for whatever reason for any sustained period of time. And so none of this debate is any of us saying we think it's a good thing for children to miss huge amounts of their schooling. And we're always conscious of our responsibility in this place to ensure that our children have the very best opportunity to be successful at school, but also recognising there's a cost of living crisis and families are feeling the pinch, and we need to do what we can to support that. And I think she also very powerfully highlighted the reality facing time-poor, financially stretched families at this moment in time and the very difficult circumstances that they face. The Honourable Gentleman from Swindon North spoke about the strength of feeling and strength of support there is for this issue, and I think he was right to do so. And he also raised the issue of, will there be a stronger amount of discretion for someone on funeral to someone who's going, who wants a school holiday but without educational benefits? And I think, the answer is that clearly, in terms of the way that policy is being applied, yes, there is a difference in those cases. But he also, I think, touched upon one of the devilishly difficult parts of this whole judgment call, which is when he was calling for clear guidelines but more discretion. And of course, that's what we all to an extent want, but also recognise the sort of central contradiction that there is in that kind of call. The honourable lady the honourable gentleman from Bournemouth East spoke up for the
Shadow
tourism
Minister
industry,
give way.
as we, of course, would expect him to do. He spoke about the escalation in costs for popular events and referred to the London Olympics and the fact that some people, in attempting to maximise the opportunities there, potentially priced themselves out of business and ended up falling victim to what they thought were going to be good times, and actually maybe ended up being a little bit too ambitious in terms of what they could charge. Whether he has turned his attention to the frankly extortionate costs that apply to members attempting to get holiday or attempting to get bed and breakfast accommodation in Manchester at the time of the Labour Party conference, I don't know. But if he has thought about that, having recently attempted to book my own holiday, I can tell him that Manchester in September is far more expensive than one might think it might be. I think we might have a plug for having your conference in Bournemouth in a minute, but I will nonetheless...
Vice Sherwood?
He's actually made my point for me. Instead of going to Manchester, the conferences are better suited than in Bournemouth.
Perkin?
Well, I congratulate him on repeating my suggestion. But what he didn't talk about, I know generally in wind-up speeches he's meant to talk about what people did talk about. I'm going to talk about what he didn't talk about on behalf of the tourism industry, and maybe to an extent was reflected by some colleagues. But I think it's an incredibly important point, which is the issue of when you are running on a 52-week a year basis, or even slightly shorter basis, holiday accommodation, and all the pressures are pushing your customer base into a shorter and shorter period, then the principles that are laid out in the petition, which is that profiteering holiday companies are exploiting us, actually is not recognised in the realities that are facing those organisations, and that if actually some kind of crude cap was to be put in place, then what they might well do is say, okay, well, we'll keep the price in August exactly as it is at the moment, but it means we won't be able to offer it as cheaply in April as we would previously have done. Actually, will we end up making people better off, or will we actually just prevent other people who are able to go away at different times from getting cheaper holidays? I think that that is one of the important questions that faces us. The Honourable Gentleman from East Hampshire confessed his sins, which is always good for a Member of Parliament to do. And if he didn't quite ask for forgiveness, he did at least offer mitigating circumstances, which I think many of us will have heard, because we will recognise that another part of this debate is that there are many people unable to take holidays during school holiday time. There are also many people who are only able to take school holidays under any circumstances during school holiday time. Teachers, anyone working in the education sector, a whole variety of people only able to take their holidays at that time. And if what we do is increase the pressure on that, we're going to push their holidays up too. So, this debate all started 18 months ago, 40 odd years ago, depending on which point you look at it. But this whole debate started prior to the changes that are going to happen. But actually, if anything, the likelihood is those changes are going to push prices up further. So that what was a problem 18 months ago will be an even bigger problem in a year or 2 years' time. My honourable friend from Leeds East also spoke about why is it now that we're talking about this? Why is it that issue is particularly become so important now? And I'm going to touch upon that in my response. But he also said that and I think this seemed to be fitting in with the broader view of the debate, that he supported the petition but not the remedy necessarily that proposed, and I think that was reflecting what a lot of people said. The other lady who spoke last from Suffolk Coastal focused on the semantics of whether special and exceptional were a different thing, and seemed to question whether there'd been a change in policy. But I think, to be clear on this, I mean, the previous government introduced the idea of fines for people who were taking children out of school on an unauthorised basis. But I think the Secretary of State was quite clear that he wanted his direction after the statutory instrument to be seen as a change of policy. And indeed, it certainly was by head teachers seen as a change of policy, and they wrote to parents. I know that in many schools in my constituency wrote to parents saying, the policy has changed, and there will no longer be basically any discretion unless very, very narrow exceptional circumstances. So I think that it's relatively clear that that was both deliberate and his intention. And I think that what this debate, and it's been a very consensual debate, it's been a very sensible debate, and I think what this debate has shown is that, you know, we all of us have a really strong and passionate feel that it's vitally important our children are in school the maximum amount of time that they can be, and that we're absolutely resilient on standards and making sure that parents recognise their responsibilities. But we also recognise that, you know, a very desperate situation exists at the moment. Prices have risen faster than wages in 41 of the last 42 months, that families are feeling the pinch, and that this is another aspect of that cost of living crisis. Now, I was intending to speak about some of the examples of the ways in which prices have increased, but that's been alluded to by many other members and meant that it's not necessary. But the extent of price differences in the on and off season is huge, and the success of that ePetition, calling for swift action, is hardly surprising. Now, Association of British Travel Agents, it's clear that the reason for these price fluctuations are the commercial realities of running a business in a seasonal market, and I think we all understand that. And when the Honourable Gentleman for East Hampshire was saying, you know, does the Labour Party propose some kind of crude cap, and expressing some of the reasons why that would be very difficult to achieve, I think he was right to say that. But I think because we don't have a policy that is on a macro level a price controls policy, that doesn't mean that there's never any cause to look into whether there is a properly functioning competitive market, and I'll touch upon that as we go through. Now, many parents feel that they're being exploited by holiday firms who use very tight limits on when they can travel to sort of overcharge them, as they would see it, with huge cost differentials reflective of that. But there haven't been any real thorough studies of this issue in recent years, which make it hard to get to the absolute bottom of the extent to which there is any aspect of exploitation. But the fact that there hasn't been that study does sit rather at odds with the government's intention of addressing consumer protection concerns. I'd be very grateful when the Minister responds. If you could comment on the apparent contradiction. Does the government think that the current situation, where one group of consumers are apparently paying over the odds to subsidise another group, is questionable under our consumer protection laws? Now, consumer law has strong protections to ensure that members of the public are charged a reasonable price for a service, and that we would imagine would include arranging a holiday. That doesn't exempt the laws of supply and demand, of course, and so again there is an interesting question for the government. And the Consumer Rights Bill currently going through Parliament has the intention of making those rules even clearer. But there is a glaring omission in the bill. It doesn't give consumers or consumer groups any power to access the information they need to check if this is the case. I wonder if the Minister accepts the only way to resolve the confusion of that matter more broadly is for a proper analysis of the prices of holidays, and whether the government have any plans to conduct that kind of research, and whether or not there was any done in the context of an analysis prior to the change of policy. The situation also demonstrates the consequences when there isn't an organisation to stand up for the rights of consumers as a group. The Honourable Member for Birmingham Yardley suggested an off-on-holiday regulator wouldn't necessarily be the correct answer, but maybe a broader consumer rights body that could act as a useful brake on exploitative practices might be something that would be worth being considered. So I think most people would accept that the rules of supply and demand will ensure that prices are higher at peak times. But many will feel the extreme divergence in prices is unfair and have suspicions about how that's set. Yeah, good way.
Human hands.
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Minister for giving way. Is he actually saying that he believes there's something in the operation of elements of the travel industry market over and above that which can be coped with by the current competition arrangements?
I think it's a valid question. I think that's what I'm saying at this stage. If there was a broader study being performed, then I think we would have better information to be able to establish that. You know, and in July 2012, the Office of Fair Trading concluded a 2-year investigation by finding that two travel giants had struck deals with a hotels group to restrict smaller agents' ability to offer discounted hotel rooms. Afterwards, Expedia themselves admitted it had engaged in cartel conduct in breach of the law. In 2013, allegations were made by a discount hotel site that they were effectively forced out of the market after attempting to undercut rivals by offering cheaper prices. So, you know, there have been allegations of cartel-like activities, and they should be investigated and pursued rigorously. And I think only when we have open and competitive markets can consumers have faith in the prices that they're paying. So I think that is important. I think it's entirely legitimate. But at the same time, we recognise market forces exist. But we don't say there's never anything to look at in the context of are those markets being fairly operated. And we stand absolutely resolutely on the side of consumers and will be willing to investigate whether action is necessary to ensure that they get a fair deal in the travel market. Now, I think that the abolition of the way that the Office Fair Trading would have looked at this issue has highlighted a gap that now exists. There isn't another appropriate body who can do what the OFT did. The Competition and Markets Authority is focused on competition and not outcomes for consumers, and so doesn't complete the same kind of work. I wonder whether the Minister shares my concerns about the fact that lack of a body now exists, and whether it makes it more likely, whether she considers it makes it more likely that consumers will get a raw deal in the future. I think that there are other things that can be done to support the tourism industry, and we recognise this is not just about tourism overseas, but very much also about tourism here in the UK. We know that the VAT increase up to 20% placed our tourist industry at a competitive disadvantage in comparison to many of our European competitors. We also know that the big impact that the huge increase there's been in business rates over the last 3 years has had on many small businesses in the hospitality and tourism industry. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I apologise for the previous engagement for having missed the beginning of his speech. But on the point that he's just made, would he perhaps agree with me that just in the same way as small businesses in the travel area are affected by some of these issues disproportionately, and particularly in the VAT area, that small businesses in the hotel and guest house industry can be as well, and that this is another facet of what is a complicated debate. And certainly I have had representations in my constituency from hoteliers and guest house owners who are concerned about this issue.
Toby Perkins.
Well, my honourable friend makes the point in exactly the way one might expect the Member of Parliament for Blackpool to do, and I think he makes a very important point. And the tourism industry isn't immune from the wider economy. It struggles when people haven't got money in their pocket. It recognises people are facing a cost of living crisis. They're also facing a cost of doing business crisis. They're also paying higher and higher business rates. They're also paying higher and higher energy prices, and this obviously then impacts on the price they have to charge in order to be able to make a profit. So he makes an important point, and it fits in precisely with the point that I was making. We also understand, to sort of reinforce that point, many small hoteliers want to offer cheaper deals, but are held back not only because of the cost of doing business, but also because their cash flow is impeded by large companies that they supply to in terms of travel websites. My honourable friend from Streatham has highlighted the totally outrageous way that large organisations effectively, through being victims of late payments or being perpetrators of paying late, force small businesses to bankroll them. And the whole issue of late payments is an incredibly important one. And has a real impact on the tourism industry and on the cost that we end up paying as consumers. Now, the last Labour government created an interest rate penalty for large firms who delayed payment to their small suppliers. And the next Labour government will further tackle the issue of late payments, which will be very important to small businesses in the tourism industry here in the UK. and will hopefully also be a part of easing that cost of doing business crisis. So in conclusion, I strongly welcome this debate. It's been thoughtful and it's been useful. We must ensure that markets are fair. We also have a responsibility in this place to respond when our constituents tell us that the policies of the government are causing problems. Each of us in this debate has reflected the difficult decisions that are faced between wanting to make sure that all children are in school for the maximum amount of time that they should be, but at the same time that people are feeling the pinch, that there is a cost of living crisis, and we need to do what we can to help people to exacerbate that at this moment in time.
Jenny Willett.
Thank you very much, Dr. McRae. And as everyone has said this afternoon, I congratulate the Honourable having securing this debate in the wake of a very significant number of signatures on the ePetition. I found it very interesting to know that it was an issue in Parliament long before I was born. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's clearly been an issue for many decades. And I have listened with great interest to the points that have been made today. There have been quite a variety of speeches today and coming from slightly different perspectives in a number of cases. And I agree with the member for Chesterfield that it's been a very good debate and on the whole fairly consensual actually. There's a reasonable amount of agreement across the House today. As a constituency MP, I've also had constituents getting in touch with me about this particular subject. And I have a personal interest as my children are heading rapidly towards school age, so along with a lot of other people, this is something that is close to my heart as well. But I'd just like to put my comments into context at the start and make clear that the government does not regulate the price at which goods or services are offered for sale. And I think we've heard from a number of members today that most people would agree that that is the way that it should be. We feel that it's a commercial matter for the businesses concerned and that the government should not intervene in that. It's not for the government to dictate to any particular market how it should charge for its services, nor intervene unless there is evidence of market distortion or market failure. So that is the issue when ministers or when the government would get involved. We've also heard today from a number of members, and I hope that honourable members would agree, that the UK holiday sector is actually one of the most competitive markets in the UK, if not across Europe. And it's made the sector not only one of the most responsive to consumer demands and preferences, but also one of the most innovative. It's driven change very much over the years. It's not so long ago that only the wealthy could contemplate having a holiday abroad. It's only a few decades. And even holidaying in the UK, which was more popular and much more affordable, was certainly not the norm for many people. And that's not that long ago, actually, that was the situation. With the development of sort of cheaper package holidays and so on, far more people have found that they can afford a foreign holiday. But actually the sector has developed very rapidly over the last few decades. And it's expanded in many respects. There's now an almost endless variety of offers available for people, which meets the demand from consumers for more choice, flexibility and value and so on. And the dynamism and innovation that's shown in this very diverse sector is evidence of very keen and persistent competition in this market. So the government feels there is no market failure and therefore no reason for the government to intervene to impose price limits. And I got the feeling today from colleagues across the House that that is something that I think most members would agree with. As the Honourable Member for East Hampshire said in his confession, that prices charged across the year reflect demand. It reflects availability and the need to attract consumers in a very competitive market. And it's common to all competitive markets, and especially acute in very fluctuating markets, such as the travel sector, that prices rise and fall according to demand and supply. It's the way that the markets work in general. When demand is high and supply is limited, prices invariably increase to the point at which demand moderates. And it's the level of demand which dictates the prices in a competitive market. So if demand decreases, so do prices as well. This market, the travel market, the holiday market, has, despite the economic difficulties that many people are facing. It's been a very difficult time for many across the economy over recent years. But despite that, the economy still appears to remain high. And the industry reports that the holiday market is buoyant and consumers are prepared to pay the prices that are being asked for the services on offer. So if people were not prepared to pay the prices being asked, then demand would drop, and as a result, prices would come down. So to some extent, it is being driven by the fact that people are prepared to pay the prices that holiday companies are demanding. Of course.
Thanks, my honourable friend, for giving way.
Hemming.
Given that this is about supply and demand, and the regulations that the government brought in affected the demand by focusing it on more on one place, is she as surprised as me that the department says in the statutory instrument that an impact assessment has not been provided for this instrument, as no impact on business or civil society organisations is foreseen?
I shall come back to the point about the regulations relating to schools, if he'll bear with me, and if he's not satisfied with my comments, then he can come back to me at that point. There is another important element to consider in respect of the prices in this sector, which was mentioned by the Honourable Member for East Hampshire. During peak periods, the UK industry is in fierce competition with other countries whose consumers also want to go on holiday to the same destinations. And this competition for limited facilities means that costs rise, even if it's not necessarily being driven by it's not all being driven by consumers in the UK. And those costs are reflected in the price that is put to the consumer. And because this is a Europe-wide market, consumers are actually similarly affected in other countries across Europe as well. And as a result, governments across Europe have decided that there needs to be protection in the package holiday sector for consumers over and above that provided by general consumer protection law. So I hope that what I'm going to say now answers one of the points that the Honourable Member for Chesterfield raised. One of the key protections included in the Package Travel Directive is the requirement that those arranging and selling package holidays and package tours must have in place protection for consumers against insolvency. And this additional protection is an area in which the UK were leaders, in fact. The Air Travel Organisers Licensing System, ATOL, was brought in before the European regime was, as a result of the huge growth in the UK of the package holiday market in the 70s and 80s. And the extra protection is considered to be necessary because those operating in the package travel market are deemed to be more at risk of insolvency than businesses in other sectors. And that's because the business model in the holiday industry is based on predicting demand and committing to those predictions in advance. I mention that because it's further evidence of the extent and the level of competition in that particular market, that the industry is forced by these pressures to price as competitively as it can, and there is considered to be a higher risk of insolvency in that sector because the margins are thin and because the market is so competitive. Of course I shall.
I'm very grateful to her giving way. Given what she's just been saying there in her contribution about the pressures on the market and what we've just heard about the fact there wasn't an impact assessment because it wasn't considered to be any impact on the industry, and given that there's been a change that actually will have been introduced from a holiday perspective after people have booked, after all those holiday companies have set their prices, does she think that the impact assessment was right to say there won't be any impact on the industry whatsoever of these changes?
Minister?
I can't comment on the impact assessment that was done by the Department for Education, but I will come back to the point around the regulations, because I think it's wrong to say that actually what was done in 2013 was a significant change in the law, but I will come back to that in a minute. Honourable members will have gathered from what I've said that I'm not convinced that businesses in the holiday market are treating consumers unfairly in the way that they price their products, but that it's pressures in the market that are causing the fluctuation in prices, which some have concluded are unfair. However, the Honourable Member for Chesterfield raised allegations of cartel-like behaviour, and if Honourable Members come across allegations of such a nature, then they should be referred to the Competition and Markets Authority for investigation. That's what they're there for, or at least they will be from the 1st of April. The cases like, I think it was Expedia that the Honourable Gentleman mentioned, which were dealt with by the Office for Fair Trading, will in future be dealt with by the Competition and Markets Authority. But they will also, the CMA will also have a role in keeping markets under review for breaches of competition law and consumer detriment. So they have a broader remit as well. And they will have a role also in dealing with consumer enforcement issues where an issue has nationwide implications, and this would be an area where that could be considered. It was also the Honourable Member for Leeds East asked about discussions between travel agents and the holiday industry and the Department for Business. And BIS is in regular contact with the holiday industry on a very wide range of issues that were across the relationship. And my officials will, of course, raise the points that have been raised in the debate today when they next meet with representatives from the industry as well. So we will make sure that the views of members are fed back. However, having said all of that, I am very sympathetic to those who struggle to afford a holiday in peak season. I do appreciate that the difference in price between off-season and high season can be very significant, and for a lot of families, particularly if you've got children, it becomes increasingly expensive and more difficult to take holidays, and I do appreciate that it does add an extra burden on families. I also completely agree that family holidays are enormously important, and children can have, it gives them opportunities to relax, to unwind and create lasting memories that, as well as sort of really building family relationships and broadening the experiences of children. I have very fond memories of holidays as a child with my grandparents, with my parents, and I'm sure everyone in the room is the same. And it is important that children are able to have those experiences and to benefit from that. Clearly, in all of this, the dates of the school holidays are critical, and it's been suggested that pressures on the industry might be alleviated by extending the periods during which families can take a holiday, so spreading demand across a longer period of time. We've heard it mentioned today, and it's an idea put forward not only by those who want cheaper family holidays, but it's also supported by many in the industry as well. We've also heard a lot today that the rules on school attendance are too strict. I think almost every single member who has spoken today has discussed this. People have suggested that schools should be able to approve families going on holiday during term time. Others believe that if school had different school term dates, then that would help as well, and I'll come back to that point. But on the issue of absence, despite the clear value that a family holiday can have for children and for parents as well for that matter, it is the government's view that a good education is more valuable for pupils in the long run, and that getting a good education depends on regular school attendance throughout the whole of the school year. We've heard a lot about the regulations being changed in 2013, and the Honourable Member for Suffolk Coastal gave a very useful summary of the legal framework, which I found quite illuminating, as I'm sure a number of my other colleagues did as well. But what the government did in 2013 was remove the misconception that was held by some parents that pupils were entitled to 10 days absence for holidays per year. But there was actually no entitlement in the previous regulations. That was not what they did. And what we've done is clarify that school heads should only accept a request for a leave of absence in exceptional circumstances. We've heard a number of examples today of cases where requests have been turned down by head teachers. And whilst many of them are very distressing, clearly I can't sort of comment on individual cases, not knowing the full details of them. But just to make it clear, the government hasn't said that no absence is possible. It has given head teachers the discretion to make that call, and we haven't specified what constitutes exceptional circumstances, as we think that individual cases need to be considered individually. A number of people mentioned the need to trust head teachers, and that's exactly what the government is trying to do, to ensure that head teachers have the power and the discretion to look at the individual circumstances of a particular application and take that into account.
John Hemming. Honourable friend for giving way. I would ask her the point that obviously it's difficult being a minister in the different department. Would she ask for the ministers in education to write to me and the members who have spoken in this debate as to what pressures Ofsted are putting on schools to reduce numbers of absence? Because if Ofsted are actually driving down the numbers then that affects what is considered to be exceptional and what is not. And obviously some of the cases which I would consider exceptional, like funerals, the school's considering not.
Minister?
To ask colleagues to write to the Honourable Gentleman, because clearly I haven't got a clue about what, as a Minister in Beers, I don't know what discussions Ofsted and the Department for Education have had, but I'm happy to pass the request on to colleagues in the Department for Education. Of course.
George Moody?
Giving way. If she could ask the Education Minister to tell the people who have attended the debate whether a family whose child has an excellent attendance record can only have a holiday with the rest of the family in term time, is the fact that they have a perfect attendance record, etc., can that be accepted as exceptional? Because that's the dilemma the heads are taking, not the cases of funeral or exceptional events, but a year in, year out problem of I cannot have a family holiday unless I can afford a family holiday unless I do it outside of term time. Will you ask the Minister if she would reassure heads that that can be regarded as exceptional?
Minister?
I'm sure that in contacting colleagues in the Department for Education, we can send them a copy of Hansard and they can respond to the points that are being raised by the Honourable Gentleman and others in this debate on that. I think that what is important is that head teachers are able to take into account the individual circumstances when they're making their decision. So they can look at things, a couple of different examples that were raised today, for example, whether a parent is in the military, or if they are police officers, whether a close relative has died. All of these are the type of instances that you cannot legislate for and actually need to be left to the head teacher's discretion in order to be able to look at the individual circumstances and take it into account. A number of honourable members have asked for clearer guidance for head teachers on what constitutes exceptional circumstances. And a couple of people have commented that it's very difficult to balance providing much clearer guidance but still allowing head teachers the discretion and trusting head teachers to be able to make the right call on particular cases. But I will refer that to colleagues in the Department for Education as well so that they can look at those requests and consider them.
Thank the Shadow Minister for giving way on this point. The issue of guidance is one where it seems to a number of the people in this debate that the head teachers are making the wrong decision. Now, if Ofsted are putting pressure on numbers, it would help to have guidance to analyse that in further depth. Prior to the changes, less than 10% of parents were taking advantage of this process in primary schools and something like under 3% in secondary schools. So it wasn't affecting a lot of people in the first instance, but those are clearly in some ways special and for some reason they're deemed not acceptable. Hence there is a reason that guidance would give head teachers strength in arguing with Ofsted.
Minister.
Well, my figures about the number of parents that took their children out of school are slightly different from the Honourable Gentleman's. My figures, the Honourable Member for Solihull also talked about the fact that most parents don't take their children out of school for school holidays. The figures that I had were from in 2011 to 12, around 90% of secondary school pupils and 80% of primary school pupils did not miss school for a family holiday, so 10 to 20% the other way around. That is clearly the overwhelming majority are not missing school to go on holiday, but that is actually still quite significant numbers of pupils that are missing school. And I will come to the Honourable Gentleman in a minute, but I think it was an issue of enough concern to the Department for Education that they felt that something needed to be done to tighten up the rules to ensure I understand that in some areas their parents seem to think that there was an entitlement to 10 days that they could take for holidays and what have you throughout the year, whereas clearly that was not the intention of the original regulations. And my understanding of the situation is that the new regulations from last year were designed to tighten that up, to make it clear the intention of the original regulations, that there was no automatic entitlement to 10 days, but that Clearly, absence has to be authorised in certain circumstances. There are always going to be exceptional circumstances that a teacher or a governor or the school will need to take into account. But that it was to clarify the misconception that there was an automatic entitlement.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I think the discrepancy between her figures and mine rests in that mine look particularly at authorised absence, and hers perhaps include the unauthorised absence as well. And one of the factors in this, obviously, is unauthorised absence we know is increasing anyway.
Minister.
That may well be the case, but I mean, that doesn't, I feel, undermine the argument that actually we need to be making sure that parents are not taking their children out of school for holidays, unless there are particularly exceptional reasons why that is a good thing. The Honourable Member for Knowsley South said in his comments earlier that where family holidays are taken during term time, that it's not only disruptive to the education of the individual student, but it's also disruptive for other pupils. And I believe the Honourable Member for Leeds East also said the same thing from the perspective of his wife as a head teacher. It's disruptive for other pupils in the class, and it leads to additional work for the school and for the teachers trying to help pupils catch up afterwards. They have to work to ensure that the student is able to make up for lost time, whilst also balancing that with the needs of the rest of the students in the class as well, to make sure that the progress for everyone else isn't disrupted. So it's not just a simple thing. If you take a child out of school, it does have significant implications for the school and for the other pupils in the class and the teachers. So the government doesn't want to change the rules on permitted absences. It's too important to the education of the child and the ability of the school to be able to teach pupils effectively. As for the other suggestion, which is around introducing more flexibility into school term dates, the industry, the holiday industry, argues that making the peak period longer would spread consumer demand over a longer period of time, so that companies could make the same money but over a longer period, and therefore would be able to reduce prices a little for families. So they could offer lower prices over that longer period of time. They also have commented that facilities would be able to be used more efficiently as well if demand is spread out over a longer period. And so competition for those facilities would be reduced as well. There would clearly remain competition with organisers of holidays from other countries, but that would also be spread over a longer period of time as well. So it would assist bringing the price down.
Tobias Elwood.
She's saying she agrees with that proposal. I gave the example of Kent, Yorkshire, Dorset, all having slightly different holiday periods, school holiday periods. Is she agreeing with that proposal? If that is the case, how would that then be best coordinated?
Minister.
Yes, I think that the staggering of school holiday periods could indeed lengthen the period of peak demand, and it could therefore help bring prices down. And I completely understand why people are suggesting, as a result, that the government should arrange for holiday periods to be spread. But at the moment, the government doesn't set term and holiday dates. Currently, local authorities set the dates for community and voluntary controlled schools, but academies, free schools and voluntary aided schools, church schools, set their own dates. What the government is doing is that the deregulation bill, which is currently before the House, will extend the power to set term dates to all schools by 2015. So all schools will be able to set their own dates and be able to vary them. So what the government believes, is that term dates as has been raised by a number of people today, actually, that this is an issue that should be dealt with locally in negotiation and cooperation across an area, so that it can take into account the educational needs of the students in the school and all the practicalities of varying the school year, including things, I can't remember which honourable member raised the fact that if you have a child in a primary school and a secondary school, you want them to be... yes, and then I'll come back.
It was myself who raised that point. And I accept that locally they can lead, but the thing I raised earlier is what works so successfully in Germany is it's set by regions to make sure then that the children who are in the primary school off at a different time to the secondary school. So whilst I accept it should be locally, I think the government could help guide regions to pick which time they go.
Minister?
It is clear that it is going to need to be done across an area, regionally, in a local authority area or more broadly. And I'm sure that this is something that when the deregulation bill becomes law, that will be looked at how best to ensure that that is done in an effective way to help schools do it and to help parents and families as well, so that, you know, with the least disruption.
Tobias Elwood.
Minister, I'm sorry to press this, but I think this is an important takeaway from this debate. As my honourable friend has just said, it does require some coordination. I'm sitting next to my honourable friend for Poole, but to get Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch to actually coordinate is quite a challenge in its own way. It does happen, but it takes time. To get all these local councils to actually coordinate themselves will be tricky, and I think there is a leadership role that the government, or at least the Department of Education, perhaps might want to look into. That's what I would encourage. Whether that be on a county or regional basis, as has been discussed, that's obviously for later date.
Minister?
It is already the case, in fact, that, as I said, a number of schools, academies, free schools and church schools are able to set their own dates. And so there is already a process in place where there is you know, some cooperation or at least awareness across areas of what local schools are doing. As following the deregulation bill, this power is given to more schools. I would hope, and I'm sure we will be encouraging schools to be collaborating on a wider area to take into account the needs of both the schools but also of the families in that area. And I'm sure we can make sure that the views that the Honourable Gentleman has expressed are fed into that process as well and taken into account by the Department for Education.
John Hemming.
Minister, for giving way on this particular point. Obviously, Schedule 14 does give that power to the schools. Constituencies like mine may have children in primary school in a family in the Birmingham Local Education Authority, but children in a secondary school actually in the Solihull Local Education Authority. And my proposal, in fact, was to perhaps bring in the Education Select Committee to look at the country as a whole and suggest sub-regions where people could coordinate in those sub-regions, because you really wouldn't want to have your children in the Birmingham primary school having a different holiday to those your children in a Solihull secondary school.
Minister.
I can't really comment on what the Education Select Committee should or should not take up, but I'm sure that the chairman of the Education Select Committee will have noted the Honourable Gentleman's comments, and it may be even that the Honourable Gentleman and anyone else who's here today who has views on that would wish to take that up directly with the chair of the Education Select Committee and suggest that they initiate an inquiry into that.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I just wanted to make her aware that not everybody in this room wants Parliament or the Education Select Committee or the ministers to determine when term dates are for schools. We really should be leaving this decision locally. They manage to cope quite well right now. There are different parts of the country that already have different holiday dates for different traditions, Leicestershire, Wigan and places like that. I think we should allow those local authorities to work with their schools to recognise what's best for their areas.
Minister.
Well, I have to confess, as an MP for a Welsh constituency, I benefited significantly last week when Parliament was on half-term because it was half-term in England, and yet when I went back home to Cardiff, all of the places where I took my small children were mercifully empty, as it's half-term in Wales this week. So it does already work in some areas. It is possible to ensure that we enable that to be done on a broader basis, to enable the peak period to be extended, hopefully to bring down prices across the sector. So, Dr. McRae, to conclude, as I'm sure everyone will be pleased to hear those words, the government is not convinced that higher prices in school holidays are as a result of market abuse by the holiday industry, but rather that they reflect the market forces in a very competitive sector, which is also made worse by the fact that we're part of an international competition as well in that market. But family holidays, I do recognise, can be incredibly valuable, but they should not be at the expense of a child's education. And school attendance throughout the school year does remain absolutely critical. We know that pupils who stay at school for longer do much better in their exams at the end. And it also...
Steve Ryan?
Yes, absolutely, I agree with the Minister. I think if you give way, I just would say to her, though, that yes, we know that school attendance is important, but we also know that parents are not daft. And this comment that I had this afternoon from a constituent who is a governor at a primary school in Winchester said to me that he finds the current changes to these rules an insult to his intelligence and his discretion. He would never dream of taking a child out at a crucial time, but especially in those early years, a reception in year one. I find it perplexing that a Conservative government is meddling in this full stop, but does the Minister have a view on there being some more discretion on those early years in primary school? And do we really need to come down on head teachers and basically question their integrity in the way that we appear to be doing?
I completely disagree with the honourable member, because actually what the government is doing is ensuring that head teachers have the discretion to make a decision when it is exceptional circumstances. And clearly part of the decision that a head teacher is going to make is going to be looking at the age of the child, the circumstances that the parent has applied for, and so on. The whole point of the regulations that the government has put in place is that we are leaving it to the discretion of head teachers to take into account the individual circumstances and make a judgment based on that. This is the exact reverse of the government meddling. But it's not just the impact on the child's education, because when a child, as I already said, and a number of members have also said this, when a child is taken out of school in a school term time, it doesn't just have an impact on that child's education, it has a broader impact on the school, on the teacher, and on the other pupils in that class as well. And we do need to take that into account as well, and I'm sure that head teachers will be looking at that when they're making a decision as well. I just wanted to say finally that I do congratulate the House on this very lively debate this afternoon. It's been a really good example, actually, of a debate where we have had a number of differing views put forward, but it's been quite lively, it's been extremely pleasant in tone, and I have an awful lot of things to go and feed back to the Department for Education, and I'm sure that the ministers will be listening very carefully and will respond to honourable members. And thank you very much, Dr McRae, and I congratulate the members for a really good debate this afternoon.
I call John Henn to respond to the debate.
I would like to thank you, Dr McRae, for chairing the meeting, and the able work for Mr Turner and all the other contributors to this particular debate. I don't think there's any advantage in repeating what everybody's said, merely to say there are some issues that need to be sorted out, and let's get on with it.
The question is, this House has considered the ePetition relating to holiday companies charging extra in school holidays. As many that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.